and brothers of GCHS, and I urge all of you to subscribe to his golf channel on YouTube. And it's a very nice channel. So bye.
Hello there, you're welcome to my channel. In today's lesson, I want us to take a look at the achievement and the failures of the Fante Confederation. In our previous video or lesson, we looked at the reasons for the formation of the Fante Confederation. And so if you did not watch that video, I would like to recommend that you go and watch that video about the reasons for the formation of the Fante Confederation, why the Confederacy was formed. I may include the link in the description so that you can click on that and watch that video as well. Now that video, this is the continuation of that video, okay? And so today we are looking at the achievement, okay? We are looking at the achievements as well as the failures of the Fante Confederation. So we are looking at two things about the Confederation, and then we will bring our discussions on the Fante Confederation to an end. All right. So before we begin with our lesson objectives, let me remind you to subscribe to our channel if you have not done so, and if you have already subscribed, we thank you very much for your support. Good. So let's begin our lesson today with our lesson objectives. So our first objective is for us to be able to outline the achievement of the Fante Confederation. And so we should be able to outline some of the achievement of the Confederation. And then the last one has to do with, you should be able to discuss the reasons for the failure of the Fante Confederation. Why the Confederation failed? Why didn't it stand the test of time? You know, why it failed. And so you should be able to do these two things by the end of our discussion. So these objectives are going to guide us as we move forward into our discussions today. So let's begin first with our first subtopic, which has to do with the achievement of the Confederacy. Now, the first achievement of the Fante Confederation was that the Fante Confederation succeeded for the first time in declaring itself independent of the British in August 1868. So the Confederation was actually formed in 1868, and when you watch, or if you have watched our previous video on the reasons for the formation, one of the reasons was that the Fantes felt that the British were not able to protect them as they had promised them, and so they had to take matters into their own hands by protecting themselves, coming together to protect themselves against Asante invasion. And so letters were written to the British after the Confederation was formed in Mangasim in 1868, and the Confederacy declared itself independent from the British rule, and therefore even seek support from the British to support them in that endeavor. So for the first time, the Fantes were able to declare themselves independent. As to whether this independence will stand, that is also a discussion for another time. So, but achievement, one of them was that they were able to declare themselves independent of the British, and that they were now going to depend on themselves in protection of their own, safety. They were going to take matters into their hands. Initially, they were relying on the British for support, military-wise, anything else. They were solely dependent on the British, unlike the Asantes. And so, with the formation of the Confederation, they were able to declare themselves independent, and that is a great achievement. The next achievement of the Fante Confederation was that the Confederation succeeded in drawing up 3 constitutions. They drew up 3 constitutions which were modeled on the idea of one of the educated elite known as J.A. Houghton. Now, the first of the constitution was prepared in January 1868, as soon as the Confederation was formed. Then the second one was in 1871, and then the last one was in April 1872. So the Confederation succeeded in drafting or drawing 3 basic constitutions which guided them. All right, and this constitution, you know what a constitution is all about. The laws that were going to be used to govern the Confederation, they managed to draw 3 of them, and this is a great achievement for them to have at that time in the 19th century. Drew up 3 constitutions that we say was one of the achievements of the Fante Confederation. Now the next achievement of the Fante Confederation has to do with this. The Confederation succeeded in the creating of a national army. For the first time, the Fantes were able to create a national army, which by April 1869 was made up of about 15,000 strong men. Now, for the first time in the history of the Southern state, if you watch our first video on the reasons for the formation of the Fante Confederation, one was that they came together to free themselves or to defend themselves against Asante invasion. And I made mention of the fact that the Southern states were always independent of each other. So none of them, they never came together to form a union. And so if Anmabo has a war, Mankesim does not care, Cape Coast does not care. If for Cape Coast is being attacked, Anmabo doesn't care. But for the first time, these Fante states came together to form an army, national army, which would defend all the territories under their jurisdiction. Hence, if the war is going on in Komenda, army must come from Mankesim, Abra, Enyan, Gomwa, all the members of the Confederation, even as far as Tentra, who were all part of the Confederation. Members or soldiers or troops may have to be drawn from all these areas just to support that war going on in one of their territory. And that was one of the greatest achievements of the Confederation. Now, the army, fought on several occasions. First of them, they assisted the people of Komenda and Tixco against the Dutch, and also fought a hunter between 1868 as well as 1870. Now, you also recall in our previous video or lesson about the reason for the formation that the people of Komenda, after the Sweet River Convention, did not agree to be under the Dutch because they had always been under the British, and they also feared that the Dutch were the traditional allies of Asante, and so they feared that allowing the treaty to take place and they being or coming under the Dutch was going to hurt them, and so they resisted, and the Dutch fought them. The Dutch actually bombarded for Komenda and Tixco, and that was the first task of the Fante Confederation's army. Army was sent from Mankesim, from all the other member states in the Confederation, to fight and liberate Komenda. As to whether it was successful or not, that is also another issue. But then that army was succeeded. For the first time, to have an army to fight on behalf of all the Fantes was a great achievement. Let's take a look at the other achievement of the Fante Confederation. Now, the Confederation also adopted a national seal consisting of an elephant standing against an oil palm tree. This was encircled by the words "the government," and later changed to the Council of the Fante Confederation, Mankesim. All right. Now, if you have watched our previous video, I did show you the national seal, and if you have not watched it, you click in the description under this video, you'll see the national seal over there. I forgot to bring it here, but hey, they were able to adopt a national seal for the first time, like an emblem. Like today we have the coat of arms, like something that represented the Confederacy. You get a point. And so that was also an achievement, and so whenever anybody sees it, they remember the Fante Confederacy. Now, the next or the last of the achievement of the Fante Confederation had to do with the Fante Confederation served as a pivot, a pivot for national unity. and encouraged nationalist movement around the coastal states and the people. The nationalist spirit urged them to come together again in 1894, 1897 to fight against the British when they made attempts to deprive the coastal states of their traditional lands. Okay, so the Confederation became like a national unity. It became like a pivot where everybody actually rallied around, and they came together to, to fight for several things. Example was the Land Bill in 1894 thereabout, where these people or these Fante's land were going to be vested into the British Crown, but that was not so. It didn't happen, all because of the activities of the Fante Confederation. Good. So we are done with the achievement of the Fante Confederacy. I hope you have learned something. Now let's take a look at the failures of the Fante Confederation. It is important to note that the Confederacy did not actually last. It collapsed at a point in time, and it ceased to exist. And so we are going to look at the failures of the Confederation, the reasons that accounted for the failure of the Fante Confederation. So let's take a look at the first reason for which led to the failure of the Fante Confederation, or the collapse of the Fante Confederation. The first one had to do with the nature of the Confederation itself, was a factor for its failure. Now remember that the Fante Confederation was made up of both Fante and non-Fante states. In our first video on the reasons for the formation of the Fante Confederation, we saw that the Fante Confederation actually, the nature of it was that it consisted of both Fante and non-Fantes, and that really was a factor which led to the collapse of the Fante Confederation. Okay, for you to have both Fante and non-Fantes. Now, why was that a factor? The Fante and the non-Fante. The non-Fante states such as Asin, Wasa, Dentra, and Chufo. And by the way, sorry for the noise in the background. The Fante states the non-Fante states such as Asin, Wasa, Dentra, and Chufo. These states joined the Fante Confederation because they wanted to resist the exchange of fort and castles. You recall in our previous discussion about the Swedish River Convention. So when the Dutch withdrew from the coast in 1871, the non-Fante states aligned with the British, and so they didn't see the reason why they should join the Confederacy, because their reason for joining the Confederation was to resist that exchange of fort and castles, which did not materialize, and so they saw no need to join the Confederacy, and so they aligned with the British, and that reduced the membership of the Confederacy. The next one also had to do with internal rivalry among the chiefs. Example was Kwesi Edu of Mankesim and King Amfo Otu of Abra. In 1872, that Edu of Mankesim was finally elected as sole president of the Confederation. By this time, the Confederation was already on the verge of collapsing. Now, these two kings were fighting for who should become the president of the Confederacy, and so that also crippled the administrative activities of the Confederation, because there was no president to take charge or to make for policies, and that was also a factor that weakened the Confederation. The third failure also had to do with that the Fante Confederation never succeeded in building a strong army. They failed to attack Elmina. Again, the army failed to reduce the Asante threat to its minimum. You recall that we said one of the achievements of the Confederation was the formation of an army. But I mean, really, the Fante Confederation was not able to actually form a strong army. It got to a time they were fighting on two fronts. They were fighting on behalf of their member states, which were in the interior, like Trifo and Gainsborough and Co. At a point in time, they were also fighting along the coast, Commander and Co. But the number of, the army was too small. The number 15,000, as we said earlier, was too small to face the Asante's threat as well as even the British. So really, they never, formed, they never succeeded in forming a real army, like a strong army. And in those days, if your army was weak, there was no way you could survive. All right. But let's take a look at the last two. In the fourth place, the Confederation was faced with financial difficulties. The Confederation ran into debt, which by 1870 amounted to 2,000 ounces of gold, and then which was equal to 7,200 pounds. Now, as a confederacy, you need money to run the affairs of the confederacy, and member states failed to pay their dues, and that also crippled the administrative, mechanisms of the confederacy, and so they couldn't survive. Now, the last of it all was the hostility of the British officials towards the confederation, and their active interference in the affairs of the confederation was the most decisive and responsible for the fall of the confederation. The British saw it as a threat, and so gunpowders and bribes, etc. The British saw the confederation as a threat, and so because of that, they failed to even sell gunpowders and ammunition to the army of the confederacy. Again, they also bribed some of the member states to come out from the confederation. Now, the British governor Charles Spencer Salmon again arrested the executives of the confederation in December 1871, and that also crippled the viability of the confederation. And so I hope you have learned something in today's discussion. You try your hands on this question, which came in WASI, May, June 2020.